Good afternoon and welcome to the Takeup. Today we have episode 78, Evergreen Topics and Trends in Embroidery. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Takeup. It is a wonderful Friday afternoon, and I'm happy to have you guys all in here to discuss these evergreen trends and topics. So we're talking about both things that are trending, things that I noticed coming back from the Minnesota DAX show and talking to embroiderers and decorators of all stripes, and talking about some of the evergreen topics that always come up whenever I teach. And the reason I'm talking about these is not just to harp on the fact that the same things are the same things over and over again, or that we always teach the same things, but to explain partially why we teach the same things and say these are areas where we need to continue our efforts in education. But certainly I think that it'll be good to take a moment and talk also about, like I said, trends, things I saw at the show, and things that are going on in the world of embroidery and decoration in general. So hopefully slightly looser show. You can see I'm at my home office. I'm not at the wonderful and brilliant studios today. I'll just fully admit to you guys, I had like a horrific migraine earlier this morning when I was producing Two Regular Guys, and kind of got through the half. Was feeling pretty down and decided I was going to hang by the house rather than drive over to the office. But if you'll hang with me today, I will try and be my level best today with you and do what I can to get you that information that you like to hear. So let's talk a little bit about the stuff. Let's talk first to the people who are here, and then we'll talk about the topics, talk about the trends, evergreen things that show up in embroidery, and I'll give you some tips and tricks along the way as we go. And certainly I would like to break things down so we talk a little bit about what's elemental about these things that keep on coming up. And why do I think that, like I said, they are consistently kind of the things that we discuss? And we'll discuss all of that as we go. But the first thing I'd like to go ahead and point out is Eric actually did his job a little bit today. And so today you actually have the links list up in the first comment, so it's clickable and easy for you to find. I have a lot of links up there because honestly, I'm going to very briefly touch on all these different topics that we always teach. And because these are things that I teach a lot, I have a lot of little resources in there for you to check out. So when we get to that, after I say hi to everybody, there is a links list link. Finally, you have a list of all these different links. Lots of fun videos. There's some audio there too. There's an early episode of Two Regular Guys that has some interesting stuff about embroidery pricing on it, and certainly some other things, including some upcoming events that I'm still doing. Should everything turn out okay, we're crossing our fingers now because things are rapidly changing in the world yet again. So we'll have to see how things go with live events. But so far, everything's booked. I know my travel's booked, and hopefully I will be out to see a lot of you guys very soon. Let's go ahead and talk to the folks who have shown up first and just say hi. You know, I like to kind of have a little bit of community time first. And first we have Gösta from Sweden. Hello, sir. How are you doing? I hope it's going well for you. I know certainly it's been a hectic time over here, but happy to have you in and glad that we could talk a little bit. I know you had some questions about Velcro and patches. If someone has their favorite tutorial on Velcro and patches, hit us up in the comments. For adding Velcro to patches, I would love to send that off to Gösta because I didn't have a ready written thing about my methods. Now I've got multiple methods for adding Velcro to patches that we've used over the years, between adhesion, cutting after the fact, stitching on pre-cut pieces in the hoop, and stitching on manually. Those are the methods we use, but I didn't have a good written up kind of catalog of these things. If you have a great written up piece or a video you'd love to share, please share it with Gösta in the comments. All right, we also have Jeff and Adam. And by the way, Adam, you're getting a lot of great comments from people in the industry saying that you are a go-getter and really on top of the ball. So kudos to Adam and kudos to Jeff for being a good dad and a supporter in his work with his hat brand. So happy to have you guys in there. And also Jeff doing a great job over, of course, at on not only Fuller Embroidery Works, but the Embroidery Nerds. So check them out. Starting off the latter half of the week of education on Thursdays. We have Ramona, who came in as well, a digitizer herself, and always an awesome supporter. Thank you, Ramona, for showing up. Frank Dunn, great supporter of the community, who shares and has his own embroidery groups too. I love that the reciprocators really are just a collection of people who share and teach and help. And guys, really, all the love to you guys. You guys are awesome, and glad to have you as part of my audience too. Rich is here. Hello, Rich. Happy to have you in. Kathleen is in. Justin Armenta, also the embroidery nerd and digitizer himself. Happy to have him in. Lisa Shaw says, good afternoon. Take care of yourself. I will certainly try. Like I said, if I'm a little squinty and I look like I'm a little pained, I do apologize, folks. But you know what? I'll be all right. Trust me. This is what I want to be doing and where I want to be. Tom Farr of Buzzards Bay Embroidery, also doing some awesome education and training. Glad to have you in. And I shared some of his pieces that you're eventually going to see coming out soon in a future issue of Images Magazine. I'm going to share some magazine stuff today, but you'll see a little bit of Tom's work there across the pond, so you can see some of his excellent work, especially with some patch style hat stuff like we talked about last week. Janine is in. Hello, Janine. Happy to have you here. Bill is in. Good afternoon, Bill. Letty's here. Very happy to see you, Letty. Thank you for all your contributions. We got Curtis in. Hello, Curtis. Waving to you too. I guess I can wave literally. I do have video. I might as well while I'm here. Steve is in too, and Steve says, hello, this beats having to run envelopes on the offset press. You know what? I have run an offset press in my time. When I was in high school, I ran little Hamada offset presses and had a pressman who was teaching us who was on like his 10th set of fingernails getting stuck in the plate. So yeah, I don't really want to run the offset press either. But I've done it. I've burned plates on the offset press, believe it or not. But that's how we do. Jeff says, Matt and Mike Muldowney have some good videos in the Embroidery Nerd group. So yeah, go check that out. Yes, I know I saw some of that stuff before. Matt's done some great stuff, and I know Mike's done some stuff too. Go check out those videos about attaching Velcro to patches. I don't have the links offhand, but if somebody wants to grab them, feel free to share them. I'm always happy to share good work, and the guys with the Embroidery Nerd do good work. All right, and Debbie says, hello from New Jersey. All right, well, let's get into it. We've got some people here. We want to talk about the stuff. We want to talk about trends. We want to talk about how, honestly, also how the shows went. I think it's important to kind of break that stuff down. If you were here for two regular guys, you certainly got a little bit of that this morning. If you saw us on the half this morning, you might have also seen a little bit about it. But I think it's worthwhile to break it down from multiple perspectives and just discuss, what did we see at the shows? Also, who the people I talked to are mostly going to be embroidery people, so they're probably going to be more up your alley for what they were discussing as far as trends, as far as what's going on with them. So we'll go ahead and talk about that for sure. I am going to go ahead and also bring up my second screen for a second so you can go ahead and see some of the stuff we have on our links list. Like I said, it's going to be coming up later on. We'll see more as we get through here, but let's just grab this into the stream for a second and say, yes, we have the links list here. What you're going to find are some articles that I did recently, and I'll get into those as well. One from Images Magazine about backgrounds and complex fills and why I highly advocate not to punch little bitty lettering out of fills. Yes, it seems like a very specific thing to discuss, but punching little tiny holes out of fills is something that I've discussed on this show before. I know we had a complex fills episode, but if you want to see it in magazine form and get a condensed version of it, this was something that actually came up in my classes and in discussing things with people at the trade show as well. So I talked with people about complex fills and the evils thereof, and possibly a little bit more about density and what it means to create density as far as two-dimensional density, layering versus the three-dimensional density, what goes through the material. And that definitely gets talked about in this background check. By the way, they name these. They come up with better names than I probably do. But at the same time, yeah, background check is there. Is that something come out of Images Magazine? I didn't name that. But I think it's great to see how they name them when they get done editing. The other one that's coming out right now, this is Graphics Pro magazine. I've got a couple more coming out from them. Once Printwear, now Graphics Pro. They have a much richer mix of different things that go on, so I'm not always in there. But this time I'm in there with headwear hooping. Once again, something that was discussed at the show. How to hoop headwear properly, how to get things to run properly depending on what kind of hat you have and what kind of frame you're using. In this case, a lot of this is about 270-degree frames because I found doing lots of dad hats on 270s, lots of unstructured hats were difficult. And in this article, we discuss how to get that full ring of stabilizer, how to hoop correctly, where the teeth on the strap goes, right? Where do those teeth go on the particular hat? Down in the seam. If you didn't know, you can see it up here. But how to position your hat correctly, and that's, like I said, a lot of the battle here. So we'll talk about that for sure. Also, just showing you the DAX stuff. I just came from Treasure Island, Minnesota. That's the show that I was at. And it was certainly a smaller show than usual, but it was a very high engagement kind of show. What I would say is whenever we do a smaller show like this, the people who come out are absolutely dedicated to making sure that everybody who is there has a chance to talk to people and has as much time as they need in the booth and off. So I will say this, smaller shows, yes, we would have loved to see more attendees at the show. However, each attendee got a lot of personal time with experts. So those who showed up really got something out of it. And hopefully we'll see more people. As you can see later on, I'll be at Tinley Park, August 27th and 28th coming up really soon. So I'll be out in the Chicagoland area and maybe in your neck of the woods teaching shortly. But I'll say that at the end of the show. Couple other things we're going to talk about. Text. So I've got something about that. We have actually another episode of the show up on the list. Patches, because once again, I can teach nothing unless I also teach some stuff about patches. Distortion, pull and push, underlay. Yes, I know, simple stuff. And then some other pieces and bits, Merrilegs, which we talked about that, about patch edges and creations, other shows that are coming up, and like I said, a couple other topics that are certainly going to come up as well. So let me go ahead and kill some of this other stuff that shouldn't be here. But yeah, we have some topics, some different things, textures, materials, just about all the stuff that you might expect was talked about at the show. The thing is, I would like to bring it up and discuss why I think these things will come up and why we end up kind of in the same track quite a lot of the time. Why do we talk about this stuff? But first, let's get on to some trends, some things that I talked about with the people who are at the shows that I think are current and are interesting. Certainly, let's go ahead and start with the first thing on the docket, and that was machine selection. Believe it or not, this is something that everybody was talking about for a couple of reasons. Number one, everybody has this sense that your machine selection is going to be absolutely the thing that makes the difference between your embroidery working and your embroidery not working. And I would like to posit that that's not exactly the case. However, machines definitely do have differences between them. The thing that I want to talk about in this range, why I thought this was interesting to discuss particularly now, is that more and more people are having a mixture of different machines and are jumping the barrier between different brands. And this is something I haven't seen as much. Certainly when people are buying used equipment and they're getting what they can get, they're getting the best that they can get for what they can afford. There's more of this multi-brand running. And certainly in the shops that I ran when I was younger, certainly those shops absolutely were multi-brand shops. I've run multiple brands of machines and have done and honestly do until this day for testing. But multi-brand machine shops seem to be more common. And it actually became a question as to what this was. And I was asked a question. I didn't get a chance to talk to the person who asked me this question, but they had a client that they were working with who was saying, okay, what's the difficulty of having a multi-brand shop? Because they wanted to have multiple kinds of machines. And I would say from my perspective, the only real difficulty I had came from one of two things. One, training. If I'm bringing on other people who are having issues with running machines and I've got to train them all on the equipment, and especially if whatever the user experience is on the equipment isn't particularly easy to understand, is a little bit harder to navigate, if I've got to have them go through multiple brands of machines, especially brand new folks who really are not kind of initiated into the more arcane sides of embroidery, then that training can be a little more difficult with a multi-machine or a multi-brand shop, just because literally the commands are different. Literally the way that these may work is different. The second thing I've had issues with the multi-brand shop was honestly with integration. If you are trying to run, let's say, a particular brand has a networking system, and this system can control the machines or does something else that is specific to the machines, and you add a machine into the shop that is not on that system, does not work by that in that fashion, then you do lose a little bit of integration. The truth of the matter, though, is with most shops that I'm talking about, the ones that I'm discussing, especially when I've seen, and I'm going to talk about this again later, when I'm seeing cottage industry shops rising, small shops rising, where they're building fleets of a couple of single heads, maybe one single, one multi, networking in that case, or the control mechanisms in that case, I don't think are that critical. And most of the time you're really dealing with maybe a couple of networked drives is essentially how the machines are going to work, and you're just dumping files on them as far as that. The only other problems with machine brands can be things like the hoops not fitting on both machines. If you have two machines who have different hoop geometry or hoop fixtures, then that can be an issue. And that also means like hooping jigs, hooping aids, things like that can be an issue. If, however, you're not having issues with the hooping, or you don't mind keeping two separate runs of hoops, then the technical issues, because that's really what people are worried about. They're worried like, I can't load my files, I can't do this, I can't do that. Yes, there may be, and there are brands that have their own sort of transfer file formats that can do more than a standard file format. But if you're talking about just the ability to load up a file format and run, there are, I mean, DST, as we all know, the Tajima standard file format is read by just about everything on the home and commercial market. You can take your same files, run them on all your machines. That's usually not the issue. We do have more issues when it comes to like integration, certainly. Whether that is that sort of networking integration where we're doing control stuff or using some sort of computer system or other method of control, or we can have issues with physical integration when we talk about hoops, if we talk about different kinds of fixtures, because the fixtures for hoops may also only fit the hoops for one kind of machine or may not work quite properly with the other hoops, depending. So that's where machine selection could be a thing. And especially if you're doing something like upgrading to all magnetic hoops and you want to be able to have them interchangeable between two machines, it may be frustrating if you have two different hoop geometries or you have two different geometries of the arms. The arms are different width depending on which side they're on. So those things can be an issue. What isn't so much of an issue, as far as I'm saying this, at least, what is more of an issue to me, at least, is that, or isn't as much of an issue, is that people ask, okay, well, what's going to be giving you the ultimate quality in each camp? Yes, it differs. Depending on the work that you're doing, it may not differ that much. And as long as you're not going with something that's, invariably a little too cheap, a little too inexpensively built, then the chances are you're probably going to be okay. If your primary work is in flat embroidery, you're probably not going to see a tremendous amount of difference from one to the other. Now, this is from someone who's running a very, very nice machine. You guys know that I'm running a ZSK Sprint. It's a very nice machine that is very technically capable. At the old shops that I ran before, I ran Tajimas and Baradins almost exclusively, but I did a tremendous amount of work, including work that I won awards on old commercial Brother machines. And I thought those were pretty good machines myself. I didn't see anything wrong with those and ran most of my award-winning pieces on those machines. So the truth of the matter is, it is not going to make you a master digitizer or a master embroiderer to have the best machine. However, certainly the great thing about machines that have a lot of mechanical reliability is that they're not down very often and they work reliably. They don't have those issues. You're not going to be seeing a lot of mechanical slowdowns or stoppage, and that can make a difference to you. However, what I've kept hearing was people saying that one or the other is going to be markedly better. Certainly, if you're in the big brands, I would say you're probably going to be safe for a lot of work. People have preferences. A lot of their preferences have to do with what they already purchased. I know it sounds terrible, but that is sometimes the case as long as we're in that kind of higher echelon of machines. And it really depends. It really depends on what kind of machines that we're talking about. If we are talking about random kind of no brand knockoff machines that you're having to, constantly adjust to keep tight, yes, that's an issue. If you're in a brand that has a good machine, then, that's usually going to be all right. So that's one of those problems. It just depends. It depends on what you're going for. I'm not going to name names. I did name some names of stuff I used, but I'll say that among those three brands, I had good results all over the place with those. I very much love the ZSK I'm running now, but it doesn't mean you can't make good embroidery on other machines. It does mean, however, that it does, like I said, it's very stable, runs very fast, does what it does for me, has a lot of great attachments. But it doesn't mean I'm never going to look at someone and say, if you're running another brand, you absolutely cannot do good embroidery. You can. So it really depends on what you're looking for. It depends on the support that's closest to you, what you need it for, what is the most important to you as far as features, because it might be different depending on your particular niche and your product mix. And it definitely is that you're not going to be locked out of running because you don't have the right file type. I think that's the thing that gets me the most, is somebody thinks that, or that your digitizing software, any digitizing software worth its salt will write a file that your machine can read. That's just the truth. So it's more about total cost of ownership, upkeep, and maintenance, and who's going to support it. So machine selection was out there, certainly, but it's the same thing I say all the time. That's not going to be the make or break for your quality of designs. And the funny thing is, I'm hearing it as if, you're going to somehow be a better embroiderer or digitizer, depending on that. If you are doing your own digitizing, you're going to have that, your interpretation of art is going to be what causes the difference there, for sure. So that's kind of how it goes. Anyway, it depends. It depends how people feel about these things. Ramona says, I have 2 brands in my shop, 4 single head machines. I can run 4 different jobs at the same time, and 2 of my machines are portable. That's what I wanted. 100%. She has a goal and something that has to do with her market and what she needs. When you need portable machines, and if your current brand doesn't have machines that are portable and you're going to do, or at least that aren't easily portable, and you're going to do work that requires portable machines, well, then you need to contact them and find out if your brand does have some offering that you're not aware of, or it might make sense to have a different machine. That is just the case. You shouldn't have to feel badly about that necessarily. Do I like to stay in one brand? Sure. It reduces training times. It causes issues if you don't. But, it's just one of those things. And I'm going to have to agree with Tom here. More about the upkeep and maintenance of the machine. Absolutely. Total cost of ownership. TCOS, or TCO, total cost of ownership. That's going to be the thing. Do some studies on that, and that's what's really going to make the difference for you. Total cost of ownership and who's going to support your machine. So support from your official support and support from the community surrounding it. Yosta says what I thoroughly agree with too. I like the machines without thread breaks. Yeah, me too. And I will say that there is something to that. A machine that has poor fit and finish, or a used machine that has a grooved up needle plate that you haven't polished out with some rouge cloth or cord, you're going to find that may have more thread breaks than you like. Certainly clean out all your thread paths, make sure it's good and kept up if you're going to run for it. And I'm going to have to agree with Mike on this one. Yeah, the old brothers were great machines, but they were selling 20 to 1 at home market to industrial. So exit stage left. Yeah, I know. Every once in a while I get real stupid and think I'm going to buy myself a Brother BAS 415 just to recapture the magic. And I realize I have a beautiful Sprint back at the shop. What am I doing? I have a lovely ZSK machine. It's like, it is German engineering as finest. Why am I trying to buy an old brother? I think sometimes it's like I said, it's very much similar with software too. Whenever somebody fights really hard with me on software choice, especially when they're doing fairly basic work, the things that we buy that we have muscle memory for, that we attribute some of our best work to, sometimes it feels like they are better just because we've joined the camp. But I don't ever want to see us in the embroidery side. And I'm sorry, screen printers, I'm going to be funny with you right now. But team blue, team green, team red, whichever team you're on, whichever machine you're running, I've seen everybody make good work. It's not, there are better and worse or whatever, more suited, more fit features to each type of machine. I would love to see us uplift each other without going, you're running what? I mean, the embroidery is the embroidery, and if it's good, it's good. But I will certainly say, in talking with people, absolutely it can happen that you get a machine that isn't as reliable or doesn't have as good support for you, or that doesn't do the kind of work that you want to do as well as another, and you upgrade. But the ultimate stitch, and this is the thing. And Mike, you must be reading my mind today. They all make the same stitch. This is true. Now, they are not all on the same tolerances. I will agree. But ultimately, they are very, very similar. And if you are you're not too far down the rabbit hole of machines that don't run very well, that are outside of the quality spectrum, you are probably going to be fine. And by the way, much to people's chagrin, this includes some home machines too, because I have run tons of little home machines and intermediate prosumer machines, and they were slower than I was used to for commercials, but they had features the commercials didn't. And I understand why people sometimes choose them. And honestly, the embroidery they were putting out was of a commensurate quality to a lot of what I was seeing. Does that mean I don't prefer the big commercial machines? No, absolutely. I prefer the commercial machines, and I love the ZSK I'm running right now. It is a piece of hot iron. It is awesome. However, this doesn't mean that a good piece of embroidery coming off another machine isn't good, even if, let's say, efficiency's sake, the other machine's slower and this one's faster. Certainly for production, I prefer the faster machine. But hey, yeah, that's the thing. I feel like I'm on team runs without issues too. So yes, Letty, I agree. But let's go ahead and get past that and just say, yeah, multi-machine setups, there was a lot more of that going on. There were more people who were bringing in multiple machines into home and craft situations as well. So it was like people, and the way I really want to bring that up, though, it wasn't so much that there was home and craft. It was that I saw a lot more of what I would call really dyed-in-the-wool kind of craft level embroiderers who are going commercial. More than I've seen before. And I know I've been fighting for this for years, kind of in the commercial magazines, saying that there was a continuum there. This is a spectrum. It's not a hard line. It's all gray area to some degree. What I would say is there were more people than usual, or at least a higher concentration at the last couple shows, of people who really did start out fully kind of in the craft mode, or at the very least who are in a very, very small third bedroom, one person, one machine situation, who were becoming very commercial and who were taking on jobs and taking on tasks that were very much in line with the kinds of things I did in my career. So the craft to commercial spectrum was certainly there, and I saw more people who were engaging in a discussion between the two. And I also saw more commercial people. I've seen at least more commercial people who were willing to entertain things that we usually consider to be craft, to entertain materials that were considered to be craft, or to entertain the kinds of work that someone might otherwise consider craft, at least in my early time as an embroiderer. Some of the things that we now do look more like what was once craft work. And I'll even include small run patches, which is something I advocate for immensely and love it. But that is not something that you would have seen necessarily every shop do back in the day. I think sometimes it would have been considered something almost like in the hoop craft work. The thing is, I'm now seeing people doing in the hoop style craft work and what I would usually have considered a craft level type of project charging adequately for it and making commercial work out of it. So the craft to commercial spectrum was not only there, I was seeing a lot of people who were willing to traverse that line and who are doing so well. So that's just something to say. And it's not that it hasn't been happening. It's that I'm seeing more people who were both crafters taking themselves seriously and getting paid for what they do in rates that were more akin to what a commercial person would be charging. So more people understanding their value, which I love to see. And also I saw more commercial people understanding that the craft market is real and that the home market might not just be craft, might not just be hobbyist. It can be everything from hobbyist to high-level enthusiasts to people who are actually working toward commercial work. And so as far as like vendors, more vendors were at least addressing that and talking to people, because I've had certainly people, I've been at the shows where someone says, you're not doing $1 million, I'm not really into talking to you. And I have never been okay with that. I hate when people say that. If you've heard me come out against it, you've heard me a million times say it, but I'll say that I think less of that was going on at the DAX shows by far, and people were certainly entertaining all comers, and I'm glad to see that. And hey, maybe a lean year makes it easier to handle that, but I don't care how we open up that discussion, just so long as the discussion is opened up. I think that's a good thing. Certainly, we can always have the discussion about pricing, and the thing I'll be saying to you, though, is this. Though people will say, oh, crafters don't do the pricing thing, that's why those of us who do pricing, like myself, go teach crafters how to price. So why do we do that? Because we want to be good stewards of the industry and make sure everybody makes their money and everybody can continue doing this work if they want to do it. So the craft to commercial sphere was really going on. And like I said, I was seeing more people who are moving to multi-machine situations. And as part of that, more people who I would have considered craft or cottage who were getting multi-head machinery as well, which was surprising because we had seen more people moving toward single head fleets. That's still happening. There's still lots of people running single head fleets where it's multiple single head machines that they're sometimes are managing with software, sometimes are just literally sneaker net running around plugging USB sticks into. But though we were used to that multi-machine fleet thing, I was kind of surprised to see the number of people asking me about multi-head machinery and how that works and what I thought about the throughput on multi-head machinery, because they were increasing in work. Now, I would say I'm going to attribute that to partially to pandemic stuff, because we had a lot of people who were able to run in small home businesses when larger businesses were shuttered. And so they managed to pull clients. And I think especially with some of them being kind of hands-on with their management of their work, some of the clients really enjoyed that way that they were being handled instead of how they were being handled as, in the commodity sense. But I also see a lot of commercial people coming back and really increasing their production as well. In fact, I've seen more people upgrading to larger shops. I've seen embroidery shops being bought into multi-decoration houses. And even though it does mean some of these shops were failing and were being closed or sold, they weren't being sold. They weren't just being parted out nearly as much as I've seen them absorbed into other work, because people were doing work and there was a ramping of the people who survived. So more multi-machine houses, both on the small end, and I was seeing more people pulling, a larger number of heads in the commercial world too. So more of that. And I will also call that investment in their businesses. Seeing a little bit more of investment in businesses going on right now. So that's what I'm thinking too. That's one of those things that's been going on as well. So it just depends, right? It just depends on where you're at, but I do think that there's some good stuff going on. And also, here's Cindy. I'm going to go ahead and drop this in here. And I love to see this because Cindy King, we know, Cindy, you're in front of pictures of multi-head machinery regularly. She's got a decently sized shop, a middle shop like the shops I came from. And she said she had gone to Applique Getaway and says, I learned some really great ideas and tips for the more craft style people. That openness of sharing the information, I think, is good. Whatever we think about everybody's use of money and getting paid and profit and whatever, I feel like sharing ideas about the craft itself, about how we work, is good. And that's pretty awesome. So I'm glad to see that. Jenny says, I went to a trade show with 20,000 pounds to spend, and I was ignored by several trade stand people. That's unfortunate. Because I'm going to tell you, if you showed up to the DAX show with the USD equivalent, you'd certainly be there. And I think, honestly, and actually, I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead and get Brian's comment on this because I really agree with it. Sometimes an industry just needs an infusion of new blood. I believe it. And what I'm going to say, too, is talking to younger people, you have to imagine that a lot of younger people come into the thing wanting a result and understanding they can get it. And so talking to some of the younger people coming up, which might be part of the new blood, and also it's older people, but who are just newer to the industry, which I'll just call younger in the industry, whatever. People are used to now going on the internet, researching something, finding a solution, and buying it and working it out, which means they're going to what? They're going to Amazon, they're going to home market stuff, and they're starting there. Then they find out. The part of the problem is, as commercial providers, I don't think we're always advertising to these people in the same way. We hide our price list, we hide kind of what we're doing to some degree. And I think that, and it's not that it's not nefarious, but we're used to doing the, hey, talk to me and let's figure out these deals because we have financing and everything else involved. But the thing is, people are coming up and they're saying, I want to make this cool thing. I'm going to figure out how to make the cool thing. They go buy it from wherever they can, and then they transition from there because they've already learned how to do the work first. I think that's why I'm also saying craft to commercial. It's also because people are coming in with a commercial mindset. They have a thing they want to make and sell, and they want to be in control of the creation themselves because they're creative and they're used to a world born of the move to, honestly, I know this sounds funny, but the move to desktop publishing back in the early days of computing, the idea that you can make it yourself is now ingrained in people. They look things up and they move from that realm. They come in saying, I'm going to make it. And what's the first kind of equipment they find? The first kind of equipment they find is going to be consumer equipment. So I think if we ignore that, and like I said, I know lots of vendors aren't ignoring them anymore. We've been seeing in the last 2 years, especially 2-3 years, commercial vendors coming out with prosumer level equipment. And I think we'll see more of them shopping their level of equipment into those markets as we go. The suppliers were ahead of it. The people making supplies were way ahead of it. They were already teaching into the craft market. And they were already understanding that home-based business was real. They were already doing it. But I don't think you necessarily saw it from all machine manufacturers. I think we'll see more of it to a degree. And if nothing else, we'll just see more openness and willingness to discuss all these things in the open to get that stuff going on. So I think that's the idea. I mean, people don't always go with that. They don't always understand that. Let's go ahead to some more stuff here real quick. Yeah, Daryl's saying looking to move to a multi-machine fleet. Yeah, I think honestly, there's nothing wrong with the multi-single head fleet. When you're doing individualized orders, a lot of highly personalization, I think the multi-machine single head fleet is a great plan. When you start doing larger orders that are all going to be the same, that don't have as much personalization, then the multi-head's going to make sense to you. It really depends on the kind of work you're doing. And it depends also on your kind of workflow and how you're getting your orders. Because I think digital workflow that encourages people to do more customization is going to make more sense in a multi-machine, single head multi-machine fleet. Whereas if you're having orders where you're doing a traditional sales style and you're doing, you're catering to medium to larger size orders. And I mean this in a scale that's not like it used to be back in the day where it's hundreds and hundreds. Because I mean, the large orders we used to have are not what the average shop is running now. But those larger orders tend to be better on a multi-head machine. So it really depends on your mix, depends on your market that you're looking for. So yeah, and Mike says very disappointing, and I agree. Same thing with Letty. We all agree that Jenny, we don't like your way that things happen there. She says, I've been doing this for 20 years and felt like I wasn't being taken seriously, and that's ridiculous. You should be taken seriously, and honestly, I'm glad that we have new blood that's getting these things going on. So, and I'll go ahead and grab Ramon on this one. When I started out all those years ago, I started the top of the line home flatbed machine. Couldn't get an idea of a cost of a multi-needle. Turns out the money I spent on flat would have bought a multi-needle with money left over. Absolutely. If right now you're looking at a single needle machine and you are thinking about doing embroidery only, you're not doing anything else, you're not doing any construction stitching, sincerely think about looking at a multi-needle commercial machine. Think about it before you buy. I'm not saying it's necessarily the right answer for you. It's not the right answer for everybody, but take a look at it. Look and ask and get pricing and answers before you buy your high-end flatbed, because you may be able to have a commercial machine. You just don't know it. And like I said, there are benefits to both. I really appreciate a tubular machine for access inside of garments. That's just the truth. And I think that's what's going on. And 100% from Mike Muldowney, he says, I think this is happening big time in this industry. The Fuller Brush old school promo item company is already having to give away more to modern business types. You can even see it in the way the websites are made. There is new blood with money to spend, and they need machines. 100%. And Daryl says, yes, a lot of my orders are custom. Yeah. Highly customized orders, good idea to do single head fleets. Let's go to a couple more trends here. We do have a couple things I wanted to bring up also that came up in those discussions with folks out there. So yeah, we talked about kind of the craft commercial and the multiple machine mixes. Definitely wanted to touch on that, but glad we got to talk about that a little bit. I do find more people who are running multiple brands and things like that. I think that rather than being scared of that as a machine manufacturer, for me, it just means that you're not going to see as many shops that are just dyed in the wool, one set only, will not change, have no opportunity. I think it means that there's a lot of opportunity, but it also means working to keep a loyalty from folks. I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it is something that means, hey, you're going to stand on more merits, and you're definitely going to have to market the right way to get everybody in the door. But that's all of us, isn't it? All right, so let's talk about something else that I saw was interesting to me. And I've noticed this over the last 2 shows. Lots more long tail and super deep, super focused niche market embroiderers. And that was kind of cool. Now, I don't know that this is necessarily something that wasn't going on, but I don't think I saw as many of these folks out at the shows asking questions. But in the last 2 shows, I've had people ask me incredibly deep questions about things that were very particular. Types of embroidery that I don't see very often. I mean, people who are having incredibly small markets where they're like, okay, what I make are costumes for Renaissance fairs. This is what I do. These are the things I do the most. I need to reproduce Elizabethan black work, and I need it to look as good on the top and bottom. No, as good on the bottom as it looks on the top. And that's the kind of questions that I don't think I got nearly as much in days gone by. I'm not going to say that it isn't something I dealt with, but you didn't see quite as much long tail niche marketing. Now, a lot of these people were also doing other kinds of work, but they had a niche that they were really working towards. That niche, that area was very particular. They were highly skilled in it, and they were looking to get more skilled and develop techniques specific to the area. And that happened several times, whether it was this, whether it was talking about automotive upholstery, whether it was talking about, and honestly, there's other things like patches, but patches is not the kind of niche I'm talking about. Certainly patches was part of it. Certainly hat work, because somebody always says I do hats more than anything. I do patches more than anything. I do, lightweight work more than anything. And then we'll get into more specialty stuff like I do bridal. But it was more like I do custom bridal veils that have to use this kind of material and this kind of thread, and I need to know everything I need to know to get that to work. I do pet market stuff specifically for this kind of pets. They do this kind of activity with their pets, and this kind of activity requires this kind of gear, and it's causing me this problem. Long tail, super deep niche market stuff was absolutely in the offering when I was teaching. Now, it also may be that people aren't willing to entertain those questions because someone just goes, I've never done that. Whereas I have a tendency to look at it and go, all right, well, if we're talking about things looking good on the back as the front, well, then we're probably talking about tensions. We're talking about what kind of bobbin you've got. We're going to have to discuss, there are things that I will break down and say, elementally, if we talk about the way the machine works and the way the thread works and the way the file works, I can still try and address it. I will certainly be very clear with people and say, yeah, I've never made that work, or at least that's not the kind of work I've done. And I try and teach them or bring them over to the point of someone who can help them with that. I teach them everything I can and then see if I can find somebody who can help with the rest. But certainly it was impressive to see people who had selected a market and were really gunning for it and had some specific connection to the market and were working it out. Now, absolutely, you can make your niche so focused that there's not enough market. I've seen that before, and I would even argue that some folks that I talk to, I'm like, boy, I hope this is a market you're already serving and not one you're trying to get into, because you need to make sure your market has space for you and money for you. But if they do, this is the kind of stuff where whoever it is who masters these things, these incredibly focused desires that people must have for them to be this keen on them, the likelihood is if they master those and become quite good, they could become well known for that in that small circle and absolutely make some money and become the go-to person in response to the question, can you get that done? So super interesting with that. But let me grab some comments on this too. Let me take a look. What is long tail? The long tail, if we think about a bell curve, and you guys know a bell curve where whenever we have a distribution where there's a bell curve in the middle, and in the bell curve, there's most of the people are in the center. They're in the average of the bell curve, right? Well, out on the edges of the bell curve to one side or other are these long, skinny tails of people that show up. That long tail means we are in a place where there's not as many people, but they may have a very finite, like a very defined thing that they're into. That long tail is saying, okay, here are people that also are not being served usually. People in the middle of the average, this is where mass market is. In the middle of the bell curve is where the mass market exists, and people are also serving that market because it's a sure thing that people are there. We know that the people are there to purchase it. Out on the long tail, out on the outside edges of the bell curve, we have people who are probably not being served, but there's not as many of them there. However, because they're underserved and they have very specific desires or things that they want, they're outside of the norm, we may be able to pick up a lot of the percentage of the long tail. It's like, whereas mass marketing to the thing that most everybody wants, or at least is within the range of what everybody's want, that place is usually full of a lot of competitors, competition. There's no blue sky. There's no open place to be because everybody knows it's there. And in there, we're swimming with a lot of sharks. We may go out to those edges, out to the long tail, and say, all right, here's a very specific group of people who want stuff that isn't getting it. And if I serve them, I may be able to take that niche market and I can make money because I have a higher percentage of these people and they're willing to spend because there's nowhere else to spend that money because they are out of the norm. They're outside of the bell curve, or at least on the outer edges of it. So yeah, that's long tail for the folks who asked. That's what I'm talking about. And when I say long tail or niche markets, I just mean that we're in this place that's a little shallower as far as how many people that you might be able to serve. However, it has this connotation now of also being where there's a very specific desire and where they may be underserved. It just happens to be that when we do mass marketing, especially the old school style of marketing, which is like commercials on TV, blast marketing like that used to really serve the middle of the bell curve the most, or at least that's where we're aiming because that's our target rich environment. There's a lot of people in there. Whereas now with the advent of social media and digital marketing, we can target people who are out on the edges in a different way than we used to. And I'm seeing people actually do it and make hay. They're making money doing that stuff. So I think that's pretty cool. And I think that's how we should think about, long tail is interesting, but also long tail, and Brian is correct in this case too, that there's multiple niches that are out in the long tail for sure. There are all sorts of little niches that are just outside of the average. It's almost like right down in the center of the middle is primetime network TV. Weird YouTube video out here in the niche, out here in the long tail. But there's all manners of different weird YouTube videos out here in the long tail. There's all kinds of niches that are out here that we're across. But it's certainly not the mass market. It's not the thing that we can put on the Super Bowl, right? It's not the thing that's going to be in everybody's face and applicable to everybody. However, like I said, it often means that we don't have a lot of service out here in the long tail. In any case, but yeah, that's just one of those things to think about. Lots of people are doing these niche markets who are working in these very specific applications. But if you own that very specific application, it's something I've said a million times to people. You never know who has a weird hobby or habit that has a mass market order waiting in the wings. Because I'll tell this story that I know I've told a million times. I'm going to get to be like Terry Combs. I'm just going to tell my same stories over and over. But here's the truth of the matter. I have done weird market work that ends up being mass market because people are all connected. And the one that I remember distinctly is I did a set of pieces for, I really think it was like 8 to 10. I can't remember what the size of the team was. It might have been 12. But there was like a dozen or less pieces for a water polo team. And yes, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, water polo team. I don't know how many there are, but I hadn't really heard of them. And it might just be the socioeconomic climate I grew up in. I don't know. However, did the water polo teams work? And we took very good care of them. I made sure their logo got dealt with. We did custom digitizing for everything. We made it nice and it worked out. And honestly, part of the thing was they just didn't have a good experience with their last people. And I have a tendency to want to kind of save the refugees of bad digitizing experiences. So I wanted to make sure that their logo looked nice. It did. When they picked it up, little do I know that one of the people who is on said team is very closely related to a purchaser for a massive services company in our state, in our city and in our state. And the truth of the matter was, once they got that and they saw what kind of great experience they had with us, we ended up doing a lot of work, and we did a gift program where we ran a big company store and almost became the merch arm for this large services company. And we did, very likely hundreds of thousands of dollars just for them over the course of the years that we were doing that work. And this is from like a 12-piece order, kind of kicked that off. The thing is, not every 12-piece order does that, but some of them do. And so the long tail may turn into, and also, by the way, that long tail work, that weird work, the work on garments we didn't usually do, that caused us to take some research, turned into standard polo shirts, standard, ad specialties, promotional products. So sometimes the long tail work, the weird work, can turn into mass market work that's simple to do. Just depends. But it's something to work through. And yeah, we'll have to see how that works. And like I said, there's different ways it gets defined. I would say that the other thing I'll say is I'm referring fairly specifically to, now I forgot his name out of anywhere, the author of Poke the Box, and I've just lost his name, Seth Godin. Seth Godin, the way he defines long tail, he has a book called We Are All Weird, and he's really into digital marketing. That's really where I get this from. So check out Seth Godin, and that's really the kind of the definition that I'm looking for. But like I said, it's not always the same wherever you hear that. But when I'm saying it, that's what I mean, and I may or may not be correct about technical usage on that. But yeah, for sure. By the way, this is Adam here. I'm trying hard to get to my market. Seems pretty hard to break through. Yeah, for sure. It can be. This is where, when we keep talking about being consistent, being persistent and consistent will wear them down. It's about being there, because part of it is top of mind awareness. And we have to remember that almost nobody makes a decision before the classic marketing rule is like 7 to 10 touches. 7 to 10 times they see you is before they know you at all, before they know who you are. So it takes time to certainly do it. And I think, honestly, I agree with Mike here. You're doing the right things, patient, professional, and persistent. That's the way it's going. And yeah, Brian absolutely has this as well. Adam, persistence overcomes resistance. Keep going, keep learning. Absolutely. And Brian should know. So listen to the guy. He knows some things. Brian does. So yeah, listen to Brian. He knows quite a lot about this. But yeah, certainly being persistent and consistent and continually putting out that content and aiming it at the right people, understanding your audience and giving things to them that are valuable to them is how it's going to go. That's the best way to keep it going. And honestly, you are ahead of the game starting at it now. But let's go ahead and grab a couple more comments before I get back into it. Cindy says, I do not know which group, but somebody does embroidery custom baseballs. Looks like lots of work, but a great niche. Yeah, well, and here's one of the things. Do the work that other people say can't be done or they won't do, and charge accordingly. If there was a tenet that got me into a lot of places, that was one of the things that happened. Now, admittedly, there are things that I did in my time that won't work now. And I'm going to be honest about this. Back in the day, for me, it was also, I'll set up a website for you and set up a company store and run it. There were lots of times where that was the sales position. It wasn't just the embroidery I was doing. It was, here, I am willing to put together a line of garments, put together a sales group, put together a website for you and run it. And the thing is, I had technical knowledge that allowed me to do that other shops did not, and they wouldn't even entertain it. In a day and age where we can now kind of set up a templated store pretty fast, that may not be the same sales position it is. Now, I'd certainly say with experience and the ability to actually follow through, it can be. But back in the day, the ability to even offer that was rare. And the willingness to take it on as a decoration shop instead of having it farmed out or handled some other way was certainly a thing. That was offering a one-stop shop and handling something that was difficult that not everybody wanted to do. And truthfully, I did also do this in creative ways and in embroidery itself. Somebody would come to me and say, I need a 9-foot curtain mocked up. I have to make a custom piece, and it has to have a border across the whole 9 feet of it. And then if we can get this worked out, then we're going to go through with mass production for a larger group. Well, the truth of the matter was, the first one that I did, I hooped this sucker in 15-inch increments. It was incredibly painful. We charged them an immense amount to get it done, but everyone else that the company had talked to turned them down flatly. We said, all right, well, here's the honest reckoning of what this is going to take for us to do it. It's going to be very expensive. We're digitizing it custom. You are bringing the sample material. It may or may not get ruined. Sign this waiver. And we are willing to take it on. And because we were the only people willing to do the work that other people wouldn't put in, we got the work. Now, what ended up happening? I did the work. It got approved. Eventually, we subbed it out to somebody who was set up for span work, who had themselves set up to do, it was still multi-needle machine embroidery, but it was done on a sash frame, as you might imagine, across the entirety of a 12 head. And we ended up doing this work. I had to redigitize it. I had to actually redesign it so it worked with the repeats that were available on the machine. But once we got that all together, we had it all subbed out. We had the yardage made up, and we made money on the deal. And honestly, had a lot of great connections out of that. So some of it is also that kind of long tail, or that kind of, let's say, underserved market. It can also be doing the creative work that other people don't want to do, and that can be something like custom baseballs, right? it can be like what Heidi's talking about, doing custom baseballs, and that's amazing stuff. I absolutely agree. And Jenny says, I do a lot of baseballs and softballs. They're just extra on top of our shop. Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. And especially you do that baseball, softball for someone, and also market your regular uniforming so that you have stuff that's not the same kind of level of work. Certainly get yourself paid for the incredible level of work that the baseballs and softballs are, but that's the truth. But yeah, and Adam, certainly I want to kick in on this too. I keep being persistent. It gets tough sometimes, but the support from everyone my dad knows keeps me going. Well, you know what? You know us too now, and as much as we can, we know you, and we're happy to support you. Because honestly, you're in a group of people who have all had to persist through tough times, who've had things hit or not hit sometimes, and we've had to deal with it too. So we're there with you. If you think just because any of us it looks successful or has been doing something for a while that we haven't had something fail, we absolutely have, or that we haven't had to wait a really long time to kind of cash out on the thing that we're investing in, we absolutely have. A lot of us have spent lots of time working on things to get here, and you're ahead of the game and doing the right stuff. So you know what? You're doing a good job, and I'm with Mike. You're rocking it. So yeah, in any case, keep it up. And also I'll say, honestly, no matter what else you do from here on, the experience you have will be valuable to you. And having persisted and said, I went into the arena, I took the chance, I stood for what I believed in and what I wanted to do with my product, and I made it work to the best of my abilities. That kind of persistence is something that not everybody has and not everybody can buy, even if they wanted to. So stick with it, do it. It's going to be worth it for you. And honestly, if nothing else, just the process and the learning and sometimes even the frustration are things that you can look back that will give you an incredible amount of perspective when you're working on other things in your life. So, I mean, like I said, congrats. We don't just say kudos to make you feel better because we like your dad. We like what you're doing, and you're doing a great job. All right, so let's get back to a little bit of the stuff we were talking about the shows. I know I kind of ran a little long, just like every time. When we talk about shows, when we talk about what's going on currently, it's hard not to get a little deeper, especially when everybody is just coming out of this funk of not having been able to see each other and talk about shop business and things that were changing. Let's go ahead and go for a few more things that I thought were interesting or at least remarkable. And this is not like this is new, but more and more embroiderers bringing on print. Now, I mean, a lot of embroiderers have been bringing on print of some kind in general, but I think more embroiderers being more serious about print. Now, it's also fine that a lot of this is outsourcing. Outsourcing is a great way to handle printed goods. And also for printers, outsourcing is a great way to handle embroidered goods, certainly. But I've seen more embroiderers getting serious about print and about multimedia. It's not just that multimedia is cool. Certainly multimedia is cool and fun. I've done a lot of it myself. I enjoy it. But multiple processes mean we do have to charge more. We have to work on it. What I'd say is that more people have these creative visions who are serving different markets that require different kinds of media to be worked on. And I would say that more and more embroiderers are getting into print and other print mediums, other mediums of decoration. And when I talk to them, it used to just be that someone's like, yeah, well, I'm working on something and I need to print a few things and I'm tired of paying for it. It's not like that anymore. It's more that I think I can expand my markets. I think I can expand my ability to express what I'm trying to, or my client's ability to express themselves. Or the other thing I'm seeing a lot of, and this is another trend that I didn't really put up here as a banner, but I'm seeing more people who are in rural areas becoming their own independent profit centers at this. Now, it's something that's always been happening, but they're going out from their comfort zones. They're definitely coming out and trying to get the same skills, equipment, and abilities that people from larger markets have. And that was pretty cool. And the funny thing is, I'm also seeing people who started out in print going into embroidery more often. And especially, we're talking about the classic, and I hate this term, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's the term that comes up when people say cricket moms. What we're saying is people who have started out in printing doing heat press vinyl applications, maybe a little bit of sublimation. Usually it's heat press vinyl, it's cut stock like that, or heat transfers that are pre-ordered, usually cut vinyl stock. Cut vinyl stock, stickers on tumblers. That's essentially what we're saying. Those folks who are doing cut vinyl applications on both hard goods and soft goods, depending on what it is, so transfers and just adhesive stock, going from there into embroidery and getting technically able. And that was really kind of cool because I've seen it go both directions, but I heard more people, especially at the last show, who had started out in the, like I said, the cricket mom world. And especially I think because now it is super, super common and easy to go pick up a commercial level cutter plotter and end up with equipment that can do fairly interesting, fairly complex work. And from there, they end up taking on work as the need arises. And I saw more of that happening. And certainly, like I said, when I'm seeing embroiders going into print, it's not just I need to add print because I feel like it. It's more like I can see where there's this synergy between all these things. I can see how I can serve a customer better, or I can see how I can create something that more completely will fill my customers' needs. And I want to actually get good. I want to have technical skill in this. And in general, overall, I saw more people who were not just saying, and yes, they want to make money, and I'm happy that they want to make money, but they weren't just saying, what do I do to make some more money? It was more like, what can I do to be successful, but also what can I do to be excellent? What can I do to surpass my limitations? What can I do to provide something that is truly, more than, that is truly exceptional? And that was interesting to see. More people wanted to know that stuff, and that was really cool. I very much enjoyed it. So seeing more people who are going into print, and like I said, embroiderers in print, certainly also printers going into embroidery who are actually taking it seriously. Absolutely fantastic. Good to see that. People who are understanding that there was some technical knowledge that was going to have to come out of this for it to work out. Fantastic. And in general, I just like when we're taking each other's methods seriously. I mean, I joke around all the time about print, and sometimes people get mad at me because I have an embroidery booster. I will tell you over and over that I think embroidery is the luxury item. It sells for higher margins, and I'll whoop on the screen printers a little bit and say, hey, screen printing is the mass market, embroidery is the luxury item. Okay. Screen printing can be very awesome, and I love screen printers. I worked in a multi-decoration shop. I'm not out there telling you your stuff's not worth anything. However, I do think the markets are still different, and I do really think that the texture embroidery is unique. What I always say is whatever method you're using, whatever decoration style you're using, find the thing about the decoration style that is unique in its application or its ability, and market to the unique ability. And the thing is, rather than take whatever art is handed us, whether this is embroidery or print, whatever it is, and try and spit it back exactly as someone gave it to us, we should say, what is the best rendition I can do of the artwork I've been given in the medium in which I'm working? How can I make the best embroidered piece from this art through interpretation? And how can I add to it through the things that can be done with my medium? The same way that a digital print, or not even that, just to say a digital rendition online. What's something that you can't get out of an online rendition of something? You can't have texture, you can't have objects, you can't have thickness, you can't have dimension. Also, you can't have reflection like foil. You can't have things like that. So printers can make foil prints in a way that you couldn't do with maybe a digital printer unless you were then applying it after the fact. So it's like, maybe we say that's part of it. You can apply things differently to screen prints than you can necessarily to some digital prints or sublimation. You can sublimate with an incredibly light hand where the thing has no texture, whereas screen print always has texture. Embroidery has an incredible amount of dimension, and we get to play with light because the angle at which our stitches lay and the length of the stitches and the configuration of how we stack them together changes the way light plays off of their surface, and it is unique. If we understand our medium to the best ability we have, we can then use the unique qualities of our medium to make something more than the initial art we're given or the initial idea we have than the thumbnail sketch we start with. We can make something more. And I love that that was actually coming through. So embroiderers going into print, we're doing it seriously. Printers coming into embroidery, we're paying attention to what it was more often. And certainly multimedia was coming up. And I like multimedia. I think that it's always a higher risk and a higher investment because we're doing more processes to each garment or each piece we're working on. And certainly there's more chance for spoilage every time a piece of equipment is used. Every time we put something under a machine, there's more chance for spoilage, more chance for things to go wrong. However, there's also more chance to make something sublime, something that transcends what we could do with either of the materials or the methods that we're working on for decoration. And seeing more of that was really cool. So that's what came up as far as, those are the kind of the trends I wanted to talk about. Suffice it to say, I think that if there was one thing that I thought was more interesting is that these people who showed up, particularly in this last couple of shows, were intent, were serious. came to invest in themselves, both in effort and honestly, and spending money to show up at the shows and taking their chances with it. I'm not saying that's the only way, and you had to go to this to prove yourself or something. I'm just saying the people who I talked to were people who came with questions, who wanted to get things done, and who really invested in being there, and that was cool. But in that, it was interesting to see kind of how the flow of machinery and workflow seems to be changing a little bit, or at least how it's been changing in kind of the circles in which I was moving. So that was really cool to see. I'd love to see more of that, and I'd love to hear more opinions on what you guys think are trends coming up. I will say, when it comes to things like, everybody will ask me like, okay, what's the new garment? The thing that killed me was I was seeing a lot of garment trends that have been kind of coming back up, and I also know are sometimes coming out of necessity. I saw people pushing dad hats again, but people are pushing dad hats because we're having trucker hat shortages. Like, there's things like that can be happening. I like the dad hat. I like the military hat. Obviously, I wear one just about every day. And the dad hat style, the classic unstructured hat with a small central icon, a little bit of text. I think it's a cool style. I still like it. I think that it's something that has not died as a trend yet, but I'm very happy to see people still going for it. And I think really it is something where people are trying new styles. I did see more people doing like camp hats. So hats that have a big front central panel that doesn't have a central seam, has that kind of curved upper seam on it. I saw more camp hats this time out than I've seen previously. But really, there seemed to be a room for a wide range of products and a wide range of decoration styles, and that's pretty cool. Does mean more to concentrate on, but like I said, all these people going long tail and niche, it also meant that there was more opportunities for everybody to find a style that works with their particular group. I think as people are more used to, honestly, getting what they want, a lot of this spurred by online marketing and online sales. While people get what they want, they expect that it will be there. They expect the kind of blank they want will show up. Now, certainly with shortages right now, might be some trouble there, but it's interesting to see that there's room for all these styles kind of concurrently, which is cool. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff there. I would say definitely still retro stuff, patches all the time. But this is actually what I really want to say. And thank you, Ramona. Once again, you guys are like on the beat with me today. I think we're all sharing the same hive mind today. Ramona said the shortages are causing more out of the box thoughts. Yes, restriction often causes us to think creatively. When we don't have the things we expect to have usually in front of us, we have to come up with a solution because the problem still exists. Even if the problem is my team needs hats. And I would say this is a great time right now to reevaluate suppliers and really evaluate hats, especially because a lot of the hats that are out that people are looking for are hats people hate to run. This is a great time to look for a hat that runs better and still looks okay that your customer might accept. And when the hats come back that you hate to run, maybe don't buy those again. I've always said there's a problem always with running a certain brand of hat. Don't sell that hat. Go to another page of the catalog, friends. Give it a shot. But yeah, I love that. And yeah, I will say though, Justin's correct. Shortages are causing a lot of trouble. I'm interpreting your cussing as trouble. We'll say BS. How about that? BS. We'll be nice and family friendly today, though. Certainly the words were not always family friendly in the last couple of days. Right. So as for terms and things that keep coming up, we're already at an hour, so I'm not going to go crazy into bonus time, especially on kind of a bit of a harder day, I have to admit, for your friend Eric. I will probably not go into 2 hours of time today. However, what I will do is I want to run through the things that keep coming up that I find to be evergreen topics and just briefly hit on those. And like I said, I have that awesome big collection of links in the links list. So if any of these apply to you, you're probably going to find something in the links list that will be interesting to you on this topic. So let's go ahead and go into some of those things that I think were just continuing to come up no matter what. We already kind of talked about it, software and hardware. Guys, look for the thing that has the feature that saves you time or allows you to do something creatively you couldn't do otherwise. Automation is great when it does something that doesn't take away your creative aegis, but creates something you couldn't do without the automation, like programmatic stitch types, things like that. Also, automation that helps you to do the busy work of embroidery. There are some things that are busy work. There are some things that are creative. I think auto digitizing isn't it, and certainly that was something that came up for me. But when we're talking about software and hardware, the one that's the best fit for you, that's going to have lowest cost of ownership, where people are going to give you the most support and that fits with the way you work and want to work, is what we want to do. So everyone always says, what's the best software for making a masterpiece of embroidery? Well, it's the one that you like working in the best that you can tolerate. I have seen every piece of software someone has used in my presence make at least one thing I would consider a masterwork. Might be slower, might be faster, depending on who's doing it, in what software. Most of them are equally capable of making awesome stuff if you want to. Some things are very special. Some kinds of automation are very special. You guys know I've talked about Merrily a few times, and that's not the only automation we have that I'm really proud of, but some things are special that don't exist in other tools. Other than that, when we're talking about straight stitch, fill stitch, and satin stitch, it really is about what's best for your budget, what has the most support, what has a community that you love to be in, and that works for you. Same thing with machinery. It's about total cost of ownership, where you're going to get support, what works for you. So anytime somebody asks me that, the one thing I will say is that is not the primary thing that's going to make you good. Knowledge is going to make you good, but the other thing that's going to make you good is support. So look for communities that are vibrant, that will help you and support you and lift you up, because that's going to be a big part of this process, is finding a community that you love. And that's software, hardware, that's materials, that's anything. And also, that's the thing. People were talking a lot about, certainly, about materials, about supplies. This one is a tough one for me, because I ran a lot of different brands of thread and a lot of brands of, and honestly, when we're talking about like stabilizer, people are asking about stabilizers. When we're talking about brands of stabilizers not made by that many manufacturers. So the likelihood is the different people you're buying from probably have a labeled product that's the same as someone else's. That's just a good bet. So with stabilizer, look to the people who are manufacturing your stabilizer or who are selling your stabilizer to you, and see what's best that they recommend for your initial setup, as far as what works for the thing that you're trying to do. Take that advice ahead of time. I think most of the time it is usually a pretty good bet, and talk to other people in the industry about it. But don't get hung up on, especially when somebody tells you a arcane mix of multiple stabilizers, the chances are it's simpler than that. I very rarely used more than one piece in anything. And honestly, usually you have a type that's working for the particular thing you want to do, and usually one piece, sometimes two, not 15, not 18,000 pieces in a stack that's all directed different ways. One of the times you will need two pieces of stabilizers with a woven stabilizer, because it has a weakness on one of the angles. So you will have to turn the two pieces 45 degrees apart from each other to take that stretch weakness and counteract it with the second piece. Other than that, most of the time I've been using one piece of stabilizer for most of the things I do. My operators didn't always do that when I wasn't careful with them. But truth of the matter is, you don't probably need something really crazy for that. When it comes to other supplies, I really would say that the decent, higher quality stuff, I mean, when you're looking at no-name, bought from wish.com supplies, you're taking your chances on that stuff. When it's really incredibly cheap and it's, less than a third of what most brands that you're familiar with are charging, you're taking that chance when you buy it, and it may or may not be wonderful. Quality may not be wonderful. However, most of the stuff that's there, people were asking me a lot about. And funny enough, I haven't had for a long time, but had this particular time. I got stopped in class and asked about rayon versus polyester. And for me, this is a pretty simple kind of thing to discuss. Rayon versus polyester. If you're doing uniforming, anything that's going to see a lot of abrasion, that may spend a lot of time outside, anything that's going to be in any sort of industrial laundry or bleached, polyester is the choice, because it will hold up. Rayon is lovely. It has a fantastic sheen. It also is wonderful as far as tensions, because it runs at lighter tensions, so it doesn't have so much spring to it. And it doesn't have so much spring to it, so it has a tendency not to cause quite as much of the lashback and stuff that you get from polyester. However, it doesn't hold up to abrasion as well, and it doesn't hold up to industrial laundry or bleach. So you can use rayon. I like rayon for home decor and things that won't be bleached or washed in any sort of harsh fashion. I definitely don't like it for anything that's going to be outside or used in an industrial setting. And if you're going to be putting it on the tire cover of a Jeep, that is right out. That is going to have to be something stronger than rayon. Polyester is a good choice, and a better choice is a matte finish polyester that has a high resistance to UV and abrasion. So that's what I think about rayon versus poly. When people are asking me about different thread brands, I have used all the top thread brands and enjoyed them all in their own way. They have a different look. I know, like Isocord I've used a ton of. Madeira I've used a ton of. I've used a fair amount of Gunnold's materials too. Truth of the matter is, they have different profiles as far as their shine, their sheen. Some are a little more sparkly. Some are a little more shiny. It depends on what you want as far as your look. I think a lot of industrial folks like to run Isocord because it has a little bit of a flatter finish. Some folks, especially if you were like me and you came up on rayon, you may like the Madeira Polyneon quite a bit because the Madeira Polyneon has a look that is more akin to rayon, even though it's a polyester. Really depends on what you want to do. But for me, the real deal is what is my customer going to use it for and how does that affect its eventual viability? So rayon versus poly, that's what I'm feeling about that stuff. So it just depends on how we're doing. And by the way, I actually looked at this and I almost listened to you, Ramona. So here's Ramona's joke. And I'll preface it by saying that you need 3 layers of tearaway offset with a cutaway between each layer, topped with a WSS topper, water soluble. And don't forget the fusible and spray to stick it all together. That is that's cardboard. That is how you make plywood. That is not how you make an embroidered piece. So yeah, that's one of those things, folks. And like I said, it has somebody who's commercial. Efficiency is the name of the game. I'm not trying to use more materials than I need to either. Plus, I think it makes a better wear. The hand is better. It's less bulletproof. It drapes on the human body better. So less material, if you can, is always nice. So I do like that one. And Mike says, only if you're embroidering a BLT. Yeah, no, that is a heck of a lot of layers. That's more layers than your average croissant. So there you go. And yeah, and honestly, this is what some people do all the time. Cindy, I agree. Some people do this. I basically stay with the brand that my main vendor carries, and that's okay. That's totally okay. If your vendor is carrying a brand and you get shipping, that's often how it is. It's like my shipping is cheaper if I go with this particular brand. Like I said, I love Madeira. I love the way it looks. You guys know I've done some webinars for them. I'm not owned by Madeira. I have used lots of other materials, and I like a lot of the stuff that I had. And honestly, there's some lovely Metler things that I had Lisa send me and show me that were cool. I don't have one brand of thread that I use to the exclusion of them all, even though I love a lot of things there, unless they have something specific. Like the matte finish that Madeira puts out, there's really not another one that I know of yet that I think does the same job. If I saw one that did the same job, I'd tell you. So for me, it's about the job that the thread does, but I do really love Madeira. I love the threads that they have, absolutely do. But I've used a lot of Isocord and Gunold, so I've used a lot of Sulky and Poly and all the stuff there too. It really just depends on what I have, and it also honestly depends on the color range. When you are in New Mexico and you are working with a ton of people who all need a different turquoise, you may find yourself buying from different people to get just the right kind of turquoise you need, and that is a problem I had. I have never seen so much a variation in a collection of turquoise threads, except for in the shops that I ran, because hey guys, that is a New Mexico color to beat the band. It's Southwestern style. There was a whole era where you had every manner of turquoise, salmon, copper, and bronze because of the Southwest style that was happening. And believe me, it's not something that's as prevalent now, but when you need just the right turquoise, you need just the right turquoise. So that's how it goes. Yeah, and that's the thing. This is often what happens, and this happens with a lot of things. It also happens with bundled software. It happens with machinery. It happens with materials. Mike says, my first machine came with a bunch of Gunold thread. Guess what I still use? Yeah, that lock-in very much happens. And Jeff says, I carry thread. As long as it doesn't turn into thread break hotel, I'll run it 100%. And by the way, don't tell anybody. Have I embroidered with serger thread? Absolutely. Spun polyester thread makes a really cool texture. Test your densities and run away. It worked pretty well for me, but I'm not saying it's something you should always do. But if you test and you're trying to do something interesting, do something interesting. And also, it's your machine. Play with it. Come on, do a little work. If you have to, talk to your machine manufacturer. Don't put anything through it that's crazy, that's going to break the machine. But some serger thread versus some standard embroidery thread might not kill it. Jeff says, I have 50 shades of gray. I won't ask, Jeff. I'm going to assume this is for the subdued color range for military patches, because that's why I had 50 shades of gray, certainly, but not the kind of 50 shades you guys are thinking about. But yeah, I had a ton of gray, and previous to that, I had a ton of different olive drab of variations and military green variations, because if you guys don't know about subdued patches, it's like a monotone or a tonal colorway for military and police patches that approximates some contrast, despite the fact that it's mostly one color. And boy, did I do a lot of that stuff in the day. Letty says, I run Endura from Tex-Mac because it's cheaper. $395 is full free shipping when I first started. Yeah. And like I said, I haven't run Endura. I don't know. I will say that I've run lots of different materials. I do have some that I don't like as much. I'll try not to throw anybody under the bus. I didn't always have the best time with Glide. There's some cool threads in that. In fact, I have some threads I run because the colorways are really interesting in Glide, but I didn't like that one as much. Like I said, when we're coming down to the hard ones for me is when we start the fight between Isocord and Polyneon. I really love Polyneon. It's my favorite, but boy, there's just some Isocords I used to love too. And a lot of that is like Mike said, I really did a lot of work in Isocord during the largest part of my career. And so sometimes I still think in those Isocord color numbers when I first select them. And I have to stop and remember if I'm using my Polyneon chest to go to the Polyneons. Once again, does it mean that there's no differences? No, there are definitely differences. There are differences in sheen. There are differences in the way they're spun, they're twisted. But what I'm saying is none of those necessarily something you can't mix and match if you want to. Just means managing 2 color systems and thread charts that does make it more of a pain. I know, because we had in our shop, we had a hand wound spool chart that was on the front desk that we had to continually wind things in and out of to show people what was in our current selection because we were running really like 4 brands. And a lot of that was to do with very particular color choices and things like having fire-resistant threads, as well as some metallics that were special to our shop. So those are things that sometimes happen. So colorways, textures, and then specialty threads that aren't the same as the rest of the threads that are out there. So it's one of those things too. No, and I would say, Cindy says, "Oh, I just ordered some Glide." Don't take that as something you don't use. I still have some Glide I use. Give it a shot, see how it works out. And for me, yeah, Glide is not my favorite thread, and it's more about the way that it looks texturally. It didn't break thread or cause me a bunch of problems. It was just that I didn't like the texture as much as the other ones that I did. So this is not me saying I don't like Glide. Glide is now Hab and Dash. They sell that. There's some really cool stuff, and they do have the pre-wound bobbins. Lots of people really like it. It was Phil-Tech back in the day when I first got it. I just don't like as much as the other ones myself. But once again, Jenny says, my fight is between Isocord and Polyneon. I use both. The sheen is much better than the Polyneon. That's how I feel too. What I will say, though, is there were some customers that I did a transition between the two. And if the customers like the more dull thread, then they might like the Isocord. The texture on the Isocord to me is a little more dull. But that's also, some people don't like the shine on the Polyneon. They find it to be too shiny, too glitzy. It depends on your customer. Believe me, I would do anything up to and including getting cotton for people too. So I have run cotton. Now, cotton thread, I dislike running cotton thread because of the incredible amount of fluff it makes. I love the way it looks. So Bermelanico is one from Madeira that I love. And I used the thick stuff, the 12 weight Bermelanico. It makes a really cool texture. It kicks a lot of fuzz. On black garments, you'll be using a lint catcher for sure to get it going. And I agree with this. The Polyneon is fantastic for sculpting. Yes. When you're doing stitch angles and carving things out of silhouettes, Polyneon is great for that because of that high sheen. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Jeff says they still market the bobbins as Phil-Tech, and I think their store is called Hab and Dash, but they're still under the Phil-Tech bubble. Yeah, for sure. And like I said, Glide, there are some really cool threads. And in fact, they had some really interesting metallics back in the day that not everybody had. And I still have some colorways of Glide that I like. So it really depends. And yeah, I agree, Jeff. Filane from Gunold's pretty fuzzy too. Clean the rotary hook a lot. Absolutely. Absolutely. So a couple of things that always come up. I'm not going to belabor these points because these are things we've talked about over and over, but this is just how it is. These are the things that came up all the time and continue to come up. Scaling up your shop, how do you handle it? So how do you do hiring? Something that I'm not necessarily going to talk about a lot here. There are people who do better jobs of doing business hiring practices. What I usually get into with people is pricing and understanding that they should be pricing in such a way, even when they're working by themselves, that if they started hiring people on, that it would make sense. If your pricing doesn't work, if you hired somebody, you're not pricing correctly for yourself. I'm going to pause on that and let that sink in for a second. If your pricing doesn't work to pay somebody a wage, you're probably not paying yourself enough either. Think about that. There's a whole pricing guide with different pricing models that's in that sheet. It's an older one from Deco Network, but that webinar still has some things that I teach today because those pricing models have not just dropped off the face of the earth. Think about pricing, think about hiring, and in that way. Even if you're a solopreneur now, if you're pricing in such a way that your time is worth nothing, then you're not pricing correctly. So think about that. Pay yourself as the first person to do your job, and then think about that going down the road for profit. Another one, the usefulness of stock designs. This is a divisive issue for some folks. One of the people who was in my class, her husband went and bought a big chunk of stock designs, and she was not particularly pleased with this inevitability of having this big chunk of stock designs to work with. Here's what I'm going to say is stock designs is something I have not used a lot of stock designs, but I do make stock designs. It's not that I don't believe in them. It depends on your market. If your market is heavy business to business and you're not doing anything like outdoor sports, team, club, and you're not doing custom stuff where it's gift style stuff where someone will come in, they want a generic object. They're going to describe the thing they want. They don't have art for it, but they want some icon, some object, something plus a name, whether, like I said, whether that's outdoors or sports or what have you. If you're not doing any of that kind of work, if it's all custom business to business, stock designs will probably be less used by you than others, unless they are what I call functional stock designs, like either Jeff Fuller's borders or our patch borders through Merrily that are part of the thing. I mean, Merrily also has the tool for creating custom contour borders, but if you're using stock borders or stock designs as part of that, or templating designs, that might be a different kind of thing. Like the people who are doing like birth announcements, graduation hats, things that might have a template where we're adding a name and some other stuff to it, but it has a icon built into it. That gift work, that's another place where stock designs work. Certainly, like I said, outdoors, where I finally did use stock designs in my career was so that I never had to make another generic bugling elk head, because I digitized quite a few of them and realized that I really didn't care to do it again if the person didn't care which one they had. But stock designs really depend on your market. And if you have a collection of stock designs, why not market them as an option to people and look for that in your market as a possibility? It might be that you're not currently doing gift work or personalized work, but you could be if you wanted to. And stock designs are really made for that. People who have a concept of what they want, but they don't have art and they're willing to pick it out of a catalog. What I will say is for people who are really looking to be dyed in the wool business to business, you're going to be doing logo work. It's very rarely going to use stock designs to make that happen. So stock is not universally not usable. It's that different kinds of stock are usable for different people. Functional stock designs like patch borders, edging, things that make things possible with your other existing designs of personalization are very different also than stock designs that are stock images, that are stock objects. So think about that. That's one of the things that came up, certainly. And like I said, I knew one person who was probably not doing well, or at least in the doghouse for the massive chunk of stock he bought. But the truth of the matter is, depending on your work that you're doing and depending on who you're marketing to, that might be fine. It might be great to have an exhaustive collection of stock. And if nothing else, if the stock's well digitized, big if the stock's well digitized, it's a great way to learn your own digitizing. So digitizing, obviously I was teaching digitizing, so it came up. How useful is digitizing in-house or not really depends on how much control you want to have, how much creative work you want to do or need to do, and how quick your turnarounds are. And honestly, I think everybody should have at least some basic level of digitizing software so they can make small alterations and or create simple stuff by themselves without waiting for it. And there is no person who is an embroiderer who should not have lettering software. You should not be waiting for someone else to do a name drop for you. That is just a thing. I'm just going to say that out there. Categorically, you can blame Eric for that and quote me on it. There is no embroidery shop that I think shouldn't have like lettering and composition software. You should be able to letter anything you need to with basic styles at least, and you should be able to take a design and drop text above or below or on it. I just think that's the case. Certainly, at me if you like. We can have that discussion about whether or not that's necessary. I think it's necessary for anybody who's got an embroidery machine. So, we can have that discussion. Auto digitizing? No. Moving on. All right. Maybe I should have said no, but suffice it to say, I did certainly caution some people on the relative usefulness of auto digitizing, because I think that that's something we should always talk about. There are automated things that are great. Like I said, programmatic stitches, something that makes a border for you without having to touch it. Something that removes excess stitches when you're stuck with two stock designs and you have to layer them. Those are the kinds of automation that are very useful. The kinds of automation that are not useful are ones that are taking away all of your creative control and don't work to make a high quality embroidery, because just getting something on the garment isn't enough. It has to at least be commensurate with the quality of most people around you, or you are not there to the party. So auto digitizing, I still don't think is there until we start pointing mass amounts of AI on it and they're trained on every digitizer designs through history until they can do that stuff. Auto is not really auto. Auto is a set of rules that are okay. that do some things with the shapes involved. But, the computer sees the edges of the shapes that are there and makes its best interpretation. You understand what the object is, and you have an imagination and can think about textural treatments and the way you break things up. The digitizer is the driver here. Small lettering will always be an issue because people are always trying to make legible small lettering, and the eye picks out problems in legibility and in clarity in lettering very readily. Small lettering is always going to be a thing. Go check out the other pieces that we've already done on it, but definitely think about small lettering. Having good small fonts is a great thing, especially if you're running patches or something where you have limited area. You're inside of a border. You're inside of a limited space. If you're running lots of hats, small lettering that runs well is worthwhile, keyboarded and otherwise. Learning small lettering is something that is valuable for any digitizer, in my opinion, no matter who you are, because I would argue the same reason why I think lettering is so important, no matter if you digitize or not. Personalization is the cornerstone and the underlying first thing that most embroidery is going to be made of in the commercial space, especially. Personalization is the base level of embroidery, and I think we're always going to be putting logos and text on things. And especially we're going to be, at the very least, dropping names on something is like, you can have monogramming without logos. You don't really have logos without text. So text in my concept is essential. I really think it is. Hooping's always going to be an issue for folks, just like stabilizer. But one of the things that came up a lot this time around was hooping aids. I believe in hooping boards. So much so that back in the day, we used to build our own hooping jigs and boards. We're out there with like plywood, cutting things out, or pieces of cutting boards and making our own jigs. These days, there is a ubiquity of hooping aids that work well. I have a Hoop Master, but there's other brands that are out there too. Whichever brand works for you is great, but a hooping aid that works for your most used pieces, I absolutely believe in, especially when they are repeatable. They can give you a positioning that you can use over and over and over again. I think that they're good, especially for commercial producers who are going to be making the same thing over and over again. If you're making things like bags and that is your top thing, you might not need a hooping board like that, but then you do want to think about things like clamps to make it much easier for you to access small pockets, or for you to be able to load and unload things without doing the conventional hooping method. And clamps can help you do that with bag sides and pockets. So hooping aids, I think, are still worthwhile, whether we're talking about things that help you hoop a shirt straight, or we're talking about clamps that help you with accessories and things that you otherwise would have trouble with. So I think that's, I think that's good. We're coming up to it. I'm going to take a couple of comments here and see what's going on, but I think that really is it. I don't want to gild the lily here. We have lots of these topics that I know we're going to revisit. Are we ever going to do another class here on small lettering? Absolutely we will. Am I going to talk about patches and patch styles again? 100%, because patches are still hot and coming up, and people still want to learn to make them and do different ways of creation. Absolutely. So are these things going to come up? Yes. The thing is, the reason why they're evergreen, there's a few different reasons. Number one, new people are coming into this industry all the time, and we should support them. What that means is that sometimes those of us who've been in the industry a little while are going to catch a show from Eric or from Lisa or from Jeff and Justin that is something they've seen before. Because eventually we are going to have to help people get back into it. I think that is the case. I really do feel like people will have to forgive us, because we have to bring the new people in, and we want to give them foundational skills that make them good citizens for our industry. And that's the same thing with pricing. It's the same thing with marketing. It's the same thing with machinery. It's the same thing with digitizing. If you want them to be good citizens and produce work that doesn't make people lose faith in embroidery, we're going to have to teach that basic stuff over and over again. New people are coming in. The new blood's coming in. We need to be there. The second thing is why they keep coming up. Repetition, because people have issues that crop back up, and whether they've relaxed into a state of not knowing what they're doing with something, or not having tried or practiced, or it might not be repetition, but it might be that they really never have, in their particular niche, their particular market, encountered a lot of a thing that other people have done all the time. It may be that your job was monogramming, and all you did were left chest or larger monograms, and that is your exposure to text. And one day someone comes to you and you decide to take an order for hats, because your machine does have a hat gauge. You dust it off, you put it together, and suddenly you're doing little spans of text over the top of cap arches, and you've never done that before. Or you decide to take on a logo that they're changing out something in a banner, and the banner is teeny tiny, need to do tiny text. You could be an embroiderer with years under your belt and never have touched text under 6 millimeters or 10 millimeters. And if that's the case, tiny text is going to be something you have to work on. Tiny text is something you're going to have to work on. So I think that's the truth. Honestly, it's something that people don't always encounter. That's like, honestly, I've got things that I hadn't done as much. Whenever we talk about animal work, I talk about the way I do it. And then I describe to someone else how people who are masters of fur patterning do it. And it's not what I usually do. Why? I was not somebody doing like dog breed animal work where it was incredibly fine, fur perfect individual stitch work. That's not something I did very often. I did some of it, funny enough, mostly with birds, but not as much. So for me, I used to point people to someone whose absolute daily work was to do that kind of fur work because I thought of it as a specialty. Does it mean that it's not something I should probably sharpen up on it? Yeah, I should probably sharpen up on it. I could get better. For sure, I could get better on fur. However, it's something where I may not have done it very much. And you might look at me and go, Eric, you're out there teaching and you got 20 years of experience or plus. How do you not know X thing about doing tight fur work? And I'd say, well, I know a fair amount about it and I do my job. I do it well. It doesn't not like the pieces I've done look bad, but I've seen masterful work. And I think that if I were honest with myself, I would love to go to their class and learn masterful work of individual placement of fur patterns and manual stitching for that work, because my practice never really ran into that. Whereas they may have never done a patch, or they may not have never done some of the commercial stuff I did, or may never have done applique. It all depends on what your market is. So those things are evergreen because of that. And also they're evergreen. A lot of those topics we just covered are things that are always going to be present in embroidery and are important to multiple disciplines. This is where it's not long tail, or at least as far as skill set is going on. There are sets of skills that are always going to keep coming back up in multiple kinds of embroidery. Small text is going to happen whether you're doing uniforms or you're doing gifts. Now, certainly, you're often like home decor. Maybe you're not touching small text ever. What I will say, though, is people who are doing like commercial work may never have done light densities show through and might not have a deep knowledge of fabrics and weaves and knits the way that home decor people do, because they work so much with the background as an element in their designs. It doesn't make any of us lesser as embroiderers to have to cover this stuff again. What it means is that these are things that are fairly universal, but that could escape us, or they're universal enough that when new people come in, they absolutely must go through them. And I think that's the case. And honestly, and also there's some things where the treatment is so idiosyncratic. The thing you have to do is so specific to the garment, the design, the placement, that you might find that particular skill set is refined and doesn't transfer to many other places. Hence my people who are talking about their very specific niche market they were in. It might be that some of the skills that they have don't transfer to anything else, or that they might lack a skill that other people have in a more generic embroidery field. So I think that's what happens. Suffice it to say, I think that evergreen topics are going to come back up, but that if we address what I consider to be the nature of our medium, what I said earlier when I was talking about people taking printing or embroidery seriously, if we address the nature of the medium, if we learn about the holistic interaction between the file, the thread, the needle, the fabric, the stabilizer, the machine, and that includes the settings and the way in which we run the machine, the way we hoop, and the different ways in which those interactions occur among all of them as they run. If we learn those things, if we learn the elemental nature of the stitch, and we learn how to work with and manipulate that elemental nature in our embroidery, in our digitizing particularly, then we can apply that to more cases as we expand out. If we learn what the stitch does in most cases in and of itself, we can then take that and extrapolate what it might do when we look at materials, when we look at different designs as we expand, as we learn. So that's why I tend to teach in a more elemental way. I tend to lecture. I don't tend to go directly to one project. There's nothing wrong with project level teaching. And in fact, if you want to learn to do one kind of project, one kind of embroidery really well, you can get up to speed much more quickly if you do a project level class, because you can go back and say, these are the steps I need to do, these are the settings I need, and implement them directly. If you learn the way I teach, there is a tendency where you may have to then go through some steps to get there. However, what I'll say is, I think both are valuable. Project level learning gets you going, and you can make inferences about the nature of the stitch, about the nature of embroidery while you learn these things, while you watch them run. And Elemental nature is useful because then when we encounter a project that is new, that doesn't exist in a YouTube video, that we can't understand by having someone show us exactly how they did it, then we can use the nature of the stitch, of the thread, of the fabric, of the stabilizer, and how they work together and how they interact to make an educated guess as to what's going to happen and allow us to make our first attempts at stitching so that we can stitch, remark on what's going on and measure what's going on in our actual stitching, analyze those pieces, rework our files, and test again. And we can get from there to our result more quickly and with less blind testing, with less blind looking for that reaction and having to just cold stitch something out with no concepts. So the trial and error comes out with some basis. So last couple comments before we get done here. Let's go ahead and see what other people are talking about real quickly. Mike says, the bit I'm working on will need a lot of cotton thread. Thanks for the downer. I am going to recommend take a look at spun polyester, kind of like serger thread. You may find the spun polyester is a little less fuzz generating. I think it is. Depends on the thread. The cotton, I've had a heck of a time with cotton. But also remember that I was using the super thick cotton thread. And Jeff's talking about Filane. I was talking about Burmilanico. Those are really thick threads. And it may also be that our needles were not quite what they should have been, or that there just wasn't a lot of space in that thread path. And so we're getting more abrasion than it should have been. Jeff says, solar active thread is pretty cool. I second that. When it first came out, I got it. But the first stuff that I had was... it was more like fishing line. It was like a monofilament, and that stuff was horrible to run. The newer stuff is much better. Not as much contrast as you would think, but it is a good, oh, look at this. There's nothing like delight to make a customer get something, because if there's something that isn't particularly just useful, doesn't have immediate utility, delight, surprise, the desire to show the cool thing to someone else is also a driver for purchasing. So Solar Active is cool. That and Solar Active can be cool, especially if we're using stuff that's specifically going to go outside. Imagine doing it for events where secret messages or something else comes out. It's very much like if you guys have seen the printing that's being done right now, where we have essentially inks that repel moisture. And so that when people are sweating, when they're either working out or doing events, that a message appears on the shirt as they sweat. Might sound kind of gross in description, but people really think that's cool. And that revelation is interesting. The solar threads can be something like that. So can glow in the dark, same kind of thing. Cindy says, I like the Kingstar Metallic, but Robson Anton Metallic J Series are fantastic. I'd say I haven't tried all of those. Kingstar, a lot of people I hear talking about. I really like the Madeira FS for more a classic look, but the Madeira CR right now is very popular too. It depends on what runs best for you and in your way that you're running things. I would say avoid super small stitches. Be careful with your thread path and watch how it's coming off that spool, and that'll help you a lot. Larger cones if you can afford them and if it works with your machine. Smaller finger length spools that have a tight curl have always been a pain in the butt for me with metallics, if I'm honest with you. Bevy Jean says, oh my goodness, I had the same problem with cotton thread. I was doing microwave vegetable bags, not too much fun. I did learn how to clean my machine a lot during this time. Absolutely, that is the case. Ramona says, stock design was it a moose, Eric, or meese? No moose, no meese. Grammatically dubious as that might be, but elk. Bugling elk was the one that I think broke me, folks, because I had made several bugling elk myself that I eventually offered as stock designs, because I found out that despite people bringing photographs of what they wanted, what they meant was one that's kind of like this. And instead, my sad soul went to the deep difficulty of digitizing several bugling elk, not knowing I could have opened a catalog. Like I said, I do love a lot of control and creativity. Not a huge elk guy. It's for sure. So yeah, every time I order, they're out of stock. Yeah, I don't know for sure who we were talking about. Jenny says, and I'm assuming about hooping aids. Yeah, absolutely necessary if you're serious about your work. I think that it's very useful. We used to hoop on tables, and I always want to tell people too, I used to hoop totally flat for spectacle frames. You don't know what a spectacle frame is? It has a hoop that's much more like a classic embroidery hoop, like you can imagine doing hand embroidery with. And it would be popped into a little frame we would call a spider frame that would hold it in position and straight. So I have done a ton of table hooping, more than most, because I worked on machines that were old when I got into the business. There were plenty of tubular machines around. We just didn't have any. So I used those stuff. I did a lot of table hooping there. And even then we built jigs for those too. The truth of the matter is having a jig makes things so much more repeatable. And now that we have an era of adjustable jigs that are easy to buy, like the Hoopmaster, I say get one. I think it's worthwhile to have, especially you're going to do any sort of polo shirts, sport shirts, just have one of those suckers. It's just going to be a lot easier. Just do it. So, I can't help it. I love this, Lisa. Okay, spewed my Coke. No. I'm glad I made you do a spit take. I mean, I'm not glad that you did if you really did a spit take, but I couldn't help it. Auto digitizing, I know that there are places in which it works. Heck, I've seen the auto satin do decent work in our own software. It can do things that are useful. There are automatic pieces that are useful, and definitely automated functions are useful. Like I said, like Merrily, like the automatic patch contour edging. That is awesome. Love it. It's when you just grab a file, spit it at the auto digitizer, and expect to come out with multiple objects of properly compensated embroidery that looks nice. It just doesn't do it yet. I haven't seen it yet, and I'll be surprised when they find it. Like I said, they have now gone to the point where AI has painted a new master that has brushstrokes that looks like an amalgamation of the old masters. Fine. When someone decides to do that, and boy, I'm not inviting them anytime soon, then maybe auto digitizing will be more able, but they're going to have to train it on a lot of designs from people like me before they get it there. Like me and you. So let's be careful, I guess, who we give our rights to, right? Anyway, last couple comments. Rona says extremely small lettering. You need to find a reference to share with the client regarding 2 millimeters with 40 weight thread. 2 millimeters with 40 weight thread, maybe straight stitch, and maybe that's it. Maybe we can talk to you about the straight stitch lettering. I teach it before, but 2 mils is getting real tiny. We'll have to see what kind of daylight you can manage with whatever word. And that's the thing. I talk about idiosyncratic solutions. There have been times where I've done extremely tiny words with 40 weight thread, but the letters that are in the words lend themselves to the stack that I need of gaps and satins. You can get incredibly small if you don't have troublesome letters. It's when you have to make an entire font of it that's slightly different. Ask me how I know. Cindy says, I love my Hoopmaster. Don't know how you hoop without it. Yeah, I mean, I've hooped without them many, many, many times, and you get your hands trained to where things should go, and you learn how to line things up. You certainly learn how to go off your collar. You learn how far down on the button plackets things are supposed to be and how far they're supposed to be down from the neck holes. You learn how to hold your hands on the seams and feel for where you're balanced. You can learn to do it. But if you could, instead of pull something down, adjust the seams a little bit and press down the top hoop while it's holding your stabilizer in place, boy, it's a lot better feeling. Can you hoop without them? Yes, you can. Would I want to if I was doing a lot of running and doing production? I don't think I would. I'd rather have a jig. Just the truth. And yeah, that's how it is. All right, folks. With that, I think that was good bonus time. It's certainly well over an hour, and I think I will rest my sore head for a minute and then get back to work. But with that, I have to say thank you for all of the interaction. Thank you also to the people who were there for the DAX show. If you didn't see it, I'll go ahead and grab this one more time. I'll go ahead and add the screen back up just for a second. We'll talk about the links list. You're going to see that in the links list, there are all these things we discussed, as well as some of the events that I'm going to. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you a couple of the events as well. DAX show is coming up again. So guys, if you are in the Chicagoland area, in the Tinley Park area, check it out, August 27th, 28th. It is a lovely venue. Are they smaller than the previous DAX shows? Yes, they are. If you haven't seen either of my longer digitizing for dimension courses, so if you didn't get in on the course I did earlier about embroidery digitizing specifically with dimension, then this one is a modified version of that course they wanted me to bring back. So it is something very similar to that course. So if you didn't get in on demystifying next level digitizing, then Elevate Your Embroidery Digitizing is an expanded version of that I made for DAX at their request. That's being taught. So you'll see me on the first day of DAX in the afternoon for about 3.5 hours plus Q&A. So imagine at least 2 of these shows. And yes, there are breaks because I'm not a cruel human being. You can always get up for a break when I can't see you here. But that's what it is. By the way, links list, Michelle, here is I'll go ahead and put the banner up for the links list again. You can copy this down or go to the top comment wherever you are. The very top first comment should have this link there. So, but it is linkslist.app/ capital U, X, lowercase x, lowercase x, VL. So what you have on screen there is how you can get to it, but it should also be the first comment on the piece. So there you are. But other than that, like I said, DAX show is coming up. So DAXshow.com, that is the last of the DAX shows that's happening in Tinley Park in the Chicagoland area. If you want to check it out, I'd love to have you. There's also a Katie Woobin, if you haven't heard from her, doing a more basic embroidery class for the night shift. So check that out, see if it's interesting to you, and feel free to ask me about it if you want to know more about what's going to be involved in the course. The description is up there. It is more intermediate to advanced. If you've never digitized a day in your life, you may not love it, but it may be something you still get into, because then you can start understanding a little bit more about dimensional design and digitizing. Some brand new newbies stayed through on the last couple runs I've done. Just depends on how much you want to hear this kind of content. If you're here now after all that content, you might like this too, because it will be me playing lecturing professor, as I often do. So that's what's going on there. The other things that are there that are new, of course, background check you'll find, and 5 simple steps to headwear hooping. Those are both current articles out in the magazines, so I'd love for you to check those out. Other than that, there's some things about lettering and anagrams, just some fun stuff. My usual patch making article that just shows some different methods of patch making. I will be updating that soon for some new material that's going on, but it does have some good topics that can help you if you really just don't know much about patch making. Another couple of things: distortion, pull and push distortion. No matter how many times I have been digitizing or teaching digitizing, I will always teach a little bit of pull and push distortion to somebody. Also underlay structures. So those are some basic ones from Mr. Xstitch that are out there. Other things I would really love for you to check out: go to the Embrilliance webpage and check out Merrily. I talked about some functional stock designs. And also check out Jeff's Fuller borders over at Fuller Embroidery Works. Very similar thing. Merrily has some other things and tools in it and some fonts that are interesting in that case. But when we're talking about something programmatic, when I talk about automation that does something for you that doesn't take away from your creativity, this is one of those great examples. We have other tools that do it, but this is something that we worked really hard on, and I love people to check it out. Merrily has an automatic patch border making function. And so embrilliance.com/product/Merrily will get you there. And it's something that I think is interesting that I'd love for people to take a look at, because that's the kind of automation I think does something interesting that doesn't take away from your selections. Other things you're going to find, I'm going to be at the Impressions Expo in Fort Worth. So if you're down in Texas, that's September 10th through 12th. And what I wanted to show you is I'm also there with one of our own from the comments who's been here today, Jeff Fuller and I. Jeff Fuller, Fuller Embroidery Works, and myself. We will both be on a panel called Elements of Excellent Embroidery. It's a panel discussion that's happening Saturday, September 11th, and that's at 1 p.m. to 2:15 p.m. You'll find that at Impressions Expo Fort Worth. And I am also teaching another course there, it's a seminar. These are short courses. These are only an hour 15. I'm teaching specialty thread, design, digitizing, and marketing, and that session is September 10th, 9 a.m. to 10:15 a.m., so early on, so you can still get out to the show floor. And that's in Fort Worth, Texas, September 10th through 12th. The other thing I am doing is also teaching about e-commerce, and that's right after that show. I'll be hanging out after that show just a little bit to go do this piece, which is a Shirt Lab. If you go to Shirt Lab Live/Fort Worth, and at Shirt Lab, I'll be teaching about e-commerce as it pertains specifically to embroidery. So e-commerce for embroidery, and you'll see my happy face there among with people who really, I don't know how I'm sharing a stage with, or how I should be listed over like Jeffrey Gittimer, who knows sales in a way that I certainly don't. But I am there to teach about e-commerce for embroiderers. So if you're commercial, dyed-in-the-wool, and you want to hear more about how I ran company stores, pretty large company stores, and what I did in that case, I'll be out at Shirt Lab Live as well. Like I said, cross your fingers, all things going well. That is all the way out in mid-September. We'll see how that turns out. That may or may not turn out, but if it does, then that's where I will be. Last couple things you'll see. One of the pieces that I put in there is a piece on pricing where I talked about pricing models, and that is Embroidery by the Numbers, and it's a few years old, but this is from the Two Regular Guys when it was audio only. If you're looking for a podcast to listen when you don't have time to watch, I think that's something interesting. One of the other things I wanted to bring up too, that when we're talking about supplies, repeatedly in this last time, it keeps coming up that people want to do this kind of embroidery. This is something I did, this piece called Lotus and Ohm, and it was done with a water-soluble topper that was incredibly thick, almost like quilt batting. And it's something that isn't made anymore, and I'm looking to see if this is something that can come back. It does require your garments to be washed, but I think it's a really lovely look, and it's something that's getting thrown around. And the funny thing is I keep seeing people asking for this type of look and embroidery again. So we may be seeing a resurgence. And since I was talking about trends, I thought I would bring it up. All right. So with that, folks, let's go ahead and since that just somehow decided to flip out, we'll remove that screen and go ahead and finish off, folks. So there we are. Link list should have that in there. If anything is missing there, you can always contact me or leave a comment on either the Facebook post or the YouTube video, and I will get back to you with any of the information you missed. So by the way, folks, I couldn't be happier to have you here, and I would love to see you guys getting out to the shows when you feel comfortable. And even if you don't, what I would love to see is you guys continue to do what you've done today, which is investing in yourself and engaging with the community. And thank you all for being here. I cannot wait to see you again next week.